In this video, we will look at orientation in your iOS 7 app and how you can make sure that your application works correctly in different phone orientations. Let's start by creating a new single view app, and we'll call it orientation test. This app is going to display a label and an image. So in order to be able to use the image in my application, I need to first add it to supporting files. So I'm going to drag an image from my computer into the supporting files folder. And then when it asks me the options for adding the files, I just want to make sure that I'm adding it to the target orientation test. And I'm also going to copy it into the group folder so that I make a physical copy of the file within my project instead of just a reference to where it was on my file system. So now on the storyboard, we'll add an image and we'll add a label. So let me just resize so that we can see it. Okay, so here in my controls, I can scroll down. Here's the label, but let me add the image first. And the image is called a UI image control. On this list, it will be shown as an image view, and we can see here the UI image view. Sorry, UI image view, not UI image control. So I'm going to drag the UI image view onto my view, and you'll see it automatically snapped out to fill the entire view. But I don't really want to do that, so how would I avoid that from happening? That's a good question. Well, its interface builder is saying, look, UI image view is the only thing on this view, so maybe I should fill it up. So you know what, let's not do that. Let's put the label on first. So if I come down, here's my label. I'll drag my label onto my view, and let me just place it somewhere, and I'm going to put a label on it that says like my book, and then I'll drag it around until I get this hint showing me that it's centered. So now I have my book centered in this actual space. So now if I go back and try to add the UI image, we'll see that it's not snapping to fill the entire view. So interface builder is smart. Sometimes things like that can be helpful when it was trying to fill the entire view, and sometimes it's not so helpful. But now it's smart enough to say, hey, look, there's something else on the view, so I'm not going to fill it up. So I'm just going to place my UI image view, and then on the properties inspector or the attributes inspector, I see this image. I can drop that down, and it detected that I put an image in my supporting files called cover concept. And if I select that, the image is going to be rendered. However, the image, it looks distorted. And look what happens as I resize. It stays distorted. Right, so this is a book image, and it has a particular aspect ratio. And if I change the size, then the image is filling the UI image view, and as a result, the image gets distorted. So this is because I have the mode of the image set to scale to fill. So regardless of the aspect ratio of the source image, it's always going to fill the rectangle of the image view. So if I change the mode, there's lots of different options that I can get, such as center, where it's centered the original image within this space, or bottom left, it's taking the bottom left part of the image, cropped by that space. But probably what I want to do is aspect fit. And what this does is it smartly fits the image within the view based on the aspect ratio of both. So in this case, the aspect ratio of my image is tall and narrow, but the aspect ratio of the image view is wide and short. And as a result, it smartly fits it in so that the entire image will fit. So it fits it to the height axis, and it just fits it accordingly. And if I were to, for example, change it so that as I drag the image and change the size around, you'll see the image always keeps its aspect ratio and keeps the correct size. So if I do something like this now, where I center it using the hints and change my size, now I have a nice large image which has maintained its aspect ratio, and I can see how it looks, and it looks more pleasing. This is what a book cover should actually look like. So that was using the mode aspect to fit. So if I run my application, I should be able to see this. And now we can see it's been cropped off a little bit at the bottom because I didn't make space for the toolbar and that kind of thing. But we can see now that I have my image and it's looking within the right aspect ratio. And let me just fix that cropping at the bottom. So if I change the height, we'll see the aspect ratio is still nice. It's still making the cover look good. And I can rerun. And I see the entire image, and this looks pretty good. So, but what happens now if the user rotates the phone, because the phone isn't always going to be upright? Now you can emulate this using the hardware menu on the iOS simulator, and you can see I have a rotate left and a rotate right command, which is just using the command key and the left or right cursor keys. You can also do a shake gesture that if you're building something that changes on shake, like the way iPod, you can shuffle or you can move to the next song by shaking the iPod. You can emulate that. But let's take a look at what happens if we change the orientation. So I'm going to rotate left, and we'll see now that the phone has been moved to the left, and we got the nice animation of the app moving to the left, but it no longer looks as good. The bottom of the image has been cropped off. It's not centered anymore. There's this big ugly white space on the right, that kind of thing. And had I done the same thing and rotated to the right, we see the same problem. So, how do I change my UI to fix that? And there's also one other problem that you'll see, and that's if you go upside down. If you go upside down, nothing happens. This is because one of the user interface guidelines from Apple is that your app shouldn't work on an iPhone in upside down mode, because if a call comes in, it makes it very awkward for the user to be able to answer the call. So by your app not working in upside down mode, the user is always going to flip the phone around so that it's no longer upside down and we have a proper portrait mode. Now you can override that in code. It is possible to do so, but we'll not do that in this tutorial. We'll just keep it with the simple basic stuff. So let's take a look next at what are we going to do to avoid this problem. Okay, first of all, if I come back to my interface builder and I take a look at the properties around my interface builder, when I go to the identity and type while I'm viewing my view, you see this checkbox auto layout is checked. Now auto layout is something that was added in iOS 6 that allows you to codelessly do some smart stuff about laying out height and width of controls and all that kind of thing. Now it's useful if you have a pretty sophisticated UI with a lot of controls on it, but for a simple UI like this, it actually gets in the way. So I'm going to turn it off. And the reason why I turned it off will be apparent if I come over here to this one. And if I select one of my controls like my image. So when I'm editing the frame rectangle and the auto sizing of my image, this becomes available to me when the auto layout is off. So you see if auto layout was on and I go back here, I can't use that tool anymore. So I'm going to turn auto layout off and come back to my image. And then on this ruler, I have this nice handy dandy little tool that gives me auto sizing both internally and externally. So what I'm going to say, if I click these, like I turn these on and off, then these give me hints about how my image is going to work in different sizes. And this little animation is showing the difference of like how it should work within different widths. Now you see what this has done is that I'm saying that I'm going to keep my borders consistent based on sizing, and right now there's no border on the image anyway. I've dragged it all the way to the edge. Where the interesting one happens is on the internal box here, that defines the size of my image. So for example, if I click the horizontal line, what I'm saying is that the width of this control should change based on the width of the application. So this is very useful now. As I change my orientation, when I move my phone into landscape mode, I'm changing the width of the UI. And this is telling me to change the width of the image to match. So it's changing the width of the image to be the full size and keep the borders. So if I had some borders, like say they were 10 pixels each, then it would be the width of the image minus 20 pixels, 10 on either side. I could, of course, turn that off if I like it. In this case, it doesn't really make any difference, but I like to leave it on in case I change things. And ditto with the label. Now you see here, by default, it's always set to lock top and left. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn this on. My label isn't full width. And I'm going to say the same thing. Oops, sometimes it's hard to click. And I'm going to say the same thing here to change the width accordingly. And then within my label text, within my label properties, I just want to change something to say center the text. I want the text to be centered within it. So now let's see what happens if I run my application. Now we can see I've created it and I've changed the orientation, but something's gone wrong. Okay, it's not quite what it was supposed to be. And if I go to orient, if I rotate to the left, I see my image is, the width has been set nicely, but the height has stayed the same. And as a result, it's been cropped top and bottom, because not only when I changed the landscape did the width of my UI change, the height also changed. So let's come back, stop this, come in, go to my image, back to this tool, and then select this one. So I'm going to change to auto size my height. What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's take a look. If I run my application, now I see what it looks like in this mode. And if I change, my height changed based on the orientation of the device as well. And now things look a lot better. Now it looks a little bit small when I go into landscape mode. There's a bit of ugly white space at the bottom. Let's see if we can fix that. So one way I can do that is by changing the image itself. I gave myself a lot of white space. If I do something like this, and now run the app again. Now we see it looks like this in portrait, and it looks like this in landscape, which is a bit nicer. I have the consistent width at the bottom between the two. It doesn't work in upside down. It works in this one. I come back here. So here's just a quick look at using controls and how I can, lay out my controls using Interface Builder so that it works in both portrait and landscape mode. As you build more advanced UI, you'll start using the auto layout functionality here, and this will allow you to line controls up against each other and create frames for controls, etc. But ultimately, you're also going to be writing code for managing controls and managing their layout. But at least in a simple UI scenario like this one, the tools do this for you, and it looks really, really nice.